Hey y'all, this is Blazing Diamond Rose. This is January 11th, 2026. Happy New Year. The title of this video is going to be called The Good Soil. This video is going to be pretty meaty. I'm going to try to keep it concise and stay on point with the little outline that I made. Please try to bear with me, but again, these are my studies, these are my meditations. This is what these scriptures that I share, these thoughts that I share, these references that I share are how I believe God is guiding me in the spirit. God is guiding me through his prayers. God is guiding me through his word. God is guiding me in the things that I've seen, I've read, I've heard, that to eat the meat and not the bones, you know. But again, I do my best to try to encourage you to consider your own trials and tribulations, your own spiritual journey, your own meditations in God's word, your own revelations that you believe that you've received from the Lord regarding your own personal experiences as a Christian in these end times, as a persecuted Christian in these end times, as a persecuted Christian on trial, as a targeted individual. Now again, the title of this video is called The Good Soil. The main point, this is the main point of this video. Do not give to Satan what belongs to God. That is the main point of this video. So I'm going to try to tie everything up with that and bring it back to that. Encouraging you to help seek God's discernment and wisdom, and applying that wisdom and discernment, and not giving to Satan, not intentionally giving to Satan what belongs to God. To not give to Satan, I can't say that enough, I'm sorry. To not give to Satan what belongs to God. Okay? Mark 12:17, Matthew 22:21, Matthew 12:30 to 37, Matthew 15:7-20, Mark 7:14-30, Mark 11 verse 11-18, Mark 5 verse 1-15, Mark 9:16-29, John 8:9-11, verses 9-11, Luke 8 verses 41-55. Now, before I go on with that, again, this is meaty, so when I put the scriptures in there, my hope is that you would read over the scriptures and reflection and analyzation, however you say that, to the points that I've made, to see what you see in reference to those scriptures, and to what I was trying to share, and to what point I was trying to make. You know, like, for example, in Mark 12:17 and Matthew 22:21, when the Pharisees, the scribes, and the Sadducees were trying to trip Jesus up with presenting him a coin and asking him whose image it is, or whose image it belongs to. Either they asked him or he asked him, something like that, right? Trying to trip him up because, again, they wanted And what I mean by trip him up, right? The high priest, remember the high priest, the Pharisees already thought he was blasphemous, already believed him to be a heretic, already believed him to be an imposter, a charlatan. But they didn't have the ultimate power to try to take out his life, right? At that particular time, right? Because they were under the Romans, right? And so they needed the Romans to prosecute him, right? They needed, so they needed to give the Romans incentive, some sort of possible justification, right? For them themselves taking Jesus out, right? So again, they needed him to, deny Caesar, who was their leader at the time, right? Julius Caesar, right? And we already know what type of cultural practices that the Romans took part in, right? Aside from the legalistic or somewhat worldly practices of the Jewish hypocrites, right? Or the Pharisees, the Pharisaical, the Pharisaical hypocrites, right? The Romans were already Gentiles, right? So we already know their culture was vastly different from the professed Hebrews, right? Let alone the professed Hebrew Pharisees, right? For example, they believed in they practiced slavery, right? They had sexual slavery and concubines. Concubines in those times were usually commonly young boys and girls, but usually the men had a preference. The aristocratic men had a preference for young boys or young male concubines, which were male sex slaves, right? So, and homosexuality was widely accepted along with their pagan beliefs of multiple polytheistic gods or idols or whatever, right? Obviously they weren't gods, but in their homosexuality they believed that it was weird that homosexuality was basically about pleasure and dominance, right? They openly had preferences for both men and women, but for some reason a lot of the aristocratic or powerful men typically had a preference for young male sex slaves. And again, in their culture it was about dominance, it was about power, it was about having someone under them. So having some young male slave under them, sex slave, was a sign of power for them, was a sign of dominance. Whoever took and even in their sexual relations, and whether it be male or female, females were never considered to have a dominant role. But in homosexuality, the power play was whoever always was the topper, or the one that was on top, right? Took the dominant role, right? It was considered dominant. So again, it was about dominance, it was about power, it was about control. So, and then sadly, if you do any, I'm not trying to go off on a tangent, but if you study anything like in African American history with slavery, right, in the transatlantic slave trade and things like that, and other things where involve great debauchery and slavery, right? To break the men, to break the slaves, right? And raping women and raping men, or raping boys, it was always about dominance and power. It was to break the spirit or mentality of the person they was trying to enslave or possess, right? And then it was a sign of power and dominance over them if they conquered them, right? or felt like they conquered them sexually, right? So again, it was about dominance. Homosexuality was about dominance and power to them, in the sense of who subdued who, right? So even in their homosexuality practices, the one who was considered on top was the dominant role, right? And women were never had a dominant role, and you see that again in their preference for young boys. Breaking young boys was their power play, right? Was their fetish, right? But I'm sorry. I'll get into this. So obviously, my point was that Satan, or the satanic characteristics, remember what I was saying in my other videos, to focus on characters, because titles, people can have all kind of titles or names, but how does their behaviors, how does their lifestyle, what are the characteristics that fit that title or that define that, right? It may be seen something completely separate to what they're called to, because a name or a title or position may represent what you're called to, what you're supposed to be responsible for, what task you are given, but how you actually handle that is determined by your behavior, right? So that ultimately defines or distinguishes you, right? So this is what we're talking about in the context of do not give to Satan what belongs to God, right? And immediately that makes me think that was just one of the examples I gave in the scriptures, but there's several other scriptures. But let's talk about, this culture represented the world. The Roman culture at that time represented the worldly fallen carnal nature, right? Why would you want to give God's people to that, right? There should be a clear distinguishment between that, right, and the people of God, or the culture of God, right? The people of God and the culture of God, the lifestyle of those who are of God. Those who are born again, those who are seeking to transform this world. Overturn this world. Upset this world, right? In the sense of the new heaven, the new earth, the heaven on earth, as it talks about in Matthew 6:10, right? When we have that big flash mob out of nowhere, when God and all His people said, all of a sudden manifest, like they were here the whole time, and it just dawns on us. We all have that big epiphany, that big aha moment at the same time, right? And it's not a dream, right? So do not give to Satan what belongs to God. Mark 12:17, Matthew 22:21, Matthew 12:30-37, Matthew 15:7-20, Mark 7:14-30, Mark 11:11-18, Mark 5:1-15, Mark 9:16-29, and that's talking about, in those passages, it's talking about the little boy, those little boys, the girls, the men who were possessed by demons. And Jesus healed them. The woman who was caught in adultery, the woman that came behind Jesus that was bleeding for years, 12 years, and came up behind him and touched the hem of his garment, and he healed her, right? These are the type of people that maybe only nurses or doctors would touch these days. Or some people will be just scared to even approach or want to not have nothing to do with. You know what I'm saying? They say, oh, they're dirty, they're filthy. Oh, they've been given over. They won't even try to fight for them or contend for them or pray or intercede for them. Because They look sick, dirty, filthy, homely, lost, bums, right? But these are the type of people that Jesus healed, right? And he told the demons they had to leave, that they had to go, that they had to leave these people, that they had to come out of these people, right? They couldn't have them. They had to give these people up. The ones, whatever people that they had, or whatever children that they had seemed to have possession over, right? Jesus told them they had to go. And when Jesus told these demons, spoke these demons out of these people, they had to go, and then they did. And none of the disciples, none of the Pharisees, none of the scribes, none of the Sadducees, none of the high priests were able to do those things. None of those things that Jesus did. It seemed like they just let Satan have those people. Right? But Jesus took them back. Right? So again, when we're talking about, do not give to Satan what belongs to God. Right? So Jesus already came in this world. Jesus already took on the penalty for us. Satan doesn't have anything. He doesn't have any ownership. So that's why I preference this video, this point this way. Because in order for him to have something, we have to give it to him. Again, just like we had to give it to him, right, in the Garden of Eden. It wasn't, he didn't own the garden. Adam and Eve had authority over the garden. And then they gave it away. They ended up giving away to him how he played them, right? How he approached them. Again, now we already know that, right? How he tried to present to them as if posed to them with some stuff, with some questions on whether they would die or not if they ate from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And then just think about how that sounds. The tree of knowledge of good and evil was right next to the tree of life. But they were preoccupied. They became preoccupied simply because God told them no, not to eat it, that they would die. But they became preoccupied and curious just because some creature came along, right? And rephrased it to them, right? And posed it to them like it was something good, that's something that they should try out for themselves. They said distinctly, right, that would give them death. It would be poison to them. And this tree over here had life. So after they had turned against God and listened to the serpent, right, he banished them from the tree of life so that they wouldn't be arbitrary toward the tree of life. So first they had it freely, but they chose poison. Right? And it says that after that Jesus, that God appointed an angel to guard the tree of life, right? To guard the Garden of Eden, the Garden of Paradise in every direction, right? What's it say in John 14:6? It says, and then he presents us with Jesus, who's the the way, the truth, and the life. So he's the living tree walking among us, right? He became the living tree walking among us. Then we had that tree of life again walking with us, and then we crucified it, right? But then he rose up, right? So he was given over to Satan for us, right? To take on our penalty, but Satan couldn't hold him, right? So again, in order to try to have any type of claim on us, he has to go through deception, right? He has to mock the Lord. He has to mock the word. He has to come at us as if we don't know the word. We don't know the truth. We don't know the way of life. We don't know God, right? He has to approach us as if we're ignorant, right? He has to try to preference us that way, right? And if we answer to that, why would you answer that? There's a verse I heard. It was in a Tyler Perry movie or something. How was it? It's not what people call you that's most important. It's what you answer to. It's what you respond to when people try to speak to you, or when you think something is speaking to you. What do you respond to? Why would you respond to someone calling you out your name? Why would you want to respond willingly, intentionally, in full discernment to someone calling you out your heart, out your spirit? You wouldn't willingly, naturally want to respond to that, or would. Right? So these things have to try to tear into us to get us to react to them, to respond to them. Right? Do not give to Satan what belongs to God. So, I'm sorry. I'm going to go in now. Okay? He gave them another parable to consider, saying, the kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed, which a man took and sowed in his field, and all of the seeds planted in the region. It is the smallest, but when it has grown, it is the largest of the garden herbs and becomes a tree, so that the birds of the air find shelter in its branches. And that is in Matthew 13:31-32, and Revelation 7:14, Isaiah 7:14, and Revelations 11:1-18. Right? Now, I'm sorry. I'm going to go to John 13:32 right quick. No, it's John 12:32. My bad. God dang it. Now, that's the parable of the mustard seed. Remember, Jesus spoke in a lot of parables. I'm about to go into that in a minute. But that mustard seed, remember how small that mustard seed is. It's like a nanobite. Nanobites are supposed to be smaller than microbites. Microchips, whatever you want to call them. They're smaller than some flea. Right? Barely visible by the naked eye. Right? Well, think about it in that sense, the little nanobite, little mustard seed, right? That it's so small in the beginning, right? It's the smallest of the herbs, right? It's medicinal. It's the smallest of the herbs, but it becomes a tree. When it becomes a tree, it's bigger than all the other trees. It's the largest tree in the garden. The mustard seed. Right? So that the birds of the air find shelter in its branches. Now, the point of the mustard seed is the level of potency in something so small. It doesn't need, you don't need a whole pound of it. It's so concentrated. And that one little speck. If you have a drop of something, some type of liquid that's super concentrated, like I guess like syrup or something, maple syrup or cough medicine or whatever, some Robitussin or whatever. Just think how concentrated that is. And those just little drops, that little potency goes a long way, right? You don't want to overdo it. You don't want to dilute it either, right? So before I go into the rest of this, think about that. Those mustard seeds are inside of us. That's that 1 John 4:4, right? Greater is he who is in me than he who's in the world. That's that little mustard seed. You might not notice unless you're not looking for it. That's what these demonic things are trying to snuff out of us. They're trying to snuff out that mustard seed. They're not trying to get heaven to come down and dive in and actually save people. They're trying to get heaven to dive in and drown in its own blood. Right? You remember that verse in Marvel, like, if you have faith as a mustard seed, you can tell there's a mountain to go jump in the sea. Like, what? What mountain? Why would you want the mountain to jump in the sea? What did the mountain do to you? Right? Alright, I'll go right quick right here. I meant to reflect on this. In verse 32 of John 12, it said, actually, we start at 27. Now my soul is troubled and deeply stressed. What shall I say? Father, save me from this hour of trial and agony. But it is for this very purpose that I have come to this hour, this time and place. Rather, I will say, Father, glorify, honor, extol your name. Then a voice came from heaven saying, I have both glorified it and will glorify it again. The crowd of people who stood nearby and heard the voice said that it had thundered. Others said an angel has spoken to him. Jesus answered, the voice has come for your sake and not for mine. Now judgment is upon this world. The sentence is being passed. Now the ruler of this world, Satan, will be cast out. And I, if and when I am lifted up from the earth on the cross, will draw all people to myself, Gentiles as well as Jews. Now, I think in a prior video last year sometime, I spoke on the unpardonable sin. I spoke on it a little bit, right? And how these things try to get us to curse ourselves. How they try to be like that King Balak who tried to get Balaam to curse the people. But he said, how can I curse what God has not cursed? I can only bless what God has blessed. I cannot curse what God has not cursed. Right? There's a verse in the Bible that says, do not look do not harm. Oh yeah, it's Matthew 18:10. Do not harm any child. Right? See to it that you do not look down on any of these little ones. Talking about children. For I say to you that their angels in heaven continually see the face of my Father who is in heaven. They continually see the face because they're pure and they're seeking his will. They're interceding for the children. They're guardians. They're guarding their souls. So it says, see to it that you do not despise any of these little ones. For I say to you, they're angels. They're guardian angels. They're ancestors who are in heaven. They're angels that are in heaven. That what? Hebrews 12:1, that huge cloud of witnesses that's surrounding us, right? That's telling us to fix our eyes on Jesus, right? That's observing and praying and interceding for us along with Jesus with everything we do, right? And also petitioning him because they want their vindication and their vengeance already for their blood. but they're waiting on the Lord, right? These are the ones in heaven, on edge, waiting to strike, but also waiting for us to repent, right? They are before the Lord 24/7, right? Face to face with Him. What it said in Matthew 5, only the pure will see the face of God. Right? Those are those who see Him. So those is 18:10. What is this the martyrs? This is the ones who've already died for the cause of righteousness, for the cause of Christ, right? So what I was saying was, these things that try to trip us up, right? Trip us up in the mind and try to get us to squirm in our blood, try to get us to curse ourselves so that we can't be blessed, so that we stifle and choke ourselves. Right? Like, there's some quote talk about hanging yourself, rope. You know what I'm saying? So they're trying to stifle our spirit, right? With these, like what we already know, these bombardments of spiritual attacks through dreams and intrusive thoughts, right? And whatever else skits that they try to manifest around us, right? But they're futile. It says, we're like omens. Jesus said that, what was that? He will draw all men to Himself, right? That is verse 32. I found that quite comforting, because I was feeling really down and depressed the other day, and really disheartened and upset about a lot of things, right? That have been attacking my mind and my heart. And again, like I said, trying to use me as a conduit on my family. And it's like, as we know, as you should know, the closer you get to God, as we already know, it's not psychic. It's not some psychic or telepathic thing. It's being in the spirit, right? Now, these things are our loved ones. You'll know the difference, because our loved ones will be angry or hurt or in turmoil, stressed out, because they'll sense the pain. They'll sense the attacks that we're going through. But the stronger they are in God, they'll be more discerning. The stronger in faith they are in God. But they'll still be hurt. They'll still be disturbed, right? Whereas these other things, it'll be entertainment for them to see us stressed. It'll be entertainment for them to see us hurt. That's their goal, to see us down and broken, right? But our loved ones that they're trying to get us to go against, they're trying to cause the, they don't want us to be refined. They want us to be at each other's throat, right? Right? So our loved ones will sense these things in the spirit, but they'll be disheartened. They'll be afflicted and grieved. They'll be grieved in the spirit too, right? So if they're not seeking God right away, or if they're too hurt or confused to seek God right away, they'll be hurt, they'll be stuck. They won't understand. So I've read a lot of forums with targeted individuals talking about their family, and this is turning against them, or they feel like so-and-so is turning against them. Family doesn't turn against you. I don't want y'all to understand that. Family does not turn against you. Family is trying to guard their hearts, right? They're under attack too. They're being messed with too, right? We're most aware of what we're facing, what's presented against us, what's presented in our mind's eye, what's presented in our mind's ear. These things that are purposely trying to destroy us or come against us in the spirit and use hosts, they're looking for confirmation. Our family members are looking for confirmation too. but confirmation of Christ, right? So if they're getting bombarded, right, with similar things, similar attacks, and then your strength, your faith is not visible, only your struggle, only your anger, only your hurt, right? They're being attacked too, so that's all they see. They might feel forced to believe only what they see, only what they hear, what they're being fed, right? Instead of what they're seeking God for, right? So you got to take that into consideration when we're when we're going through our own trials, because that's just what time it is. That's just how severe the war is. That's how fake this false peace is. Our daughters, our sons are wounded in the heart, are wounded in the soul, right? And the healing of this world only can offer superficial crap. Can only offer them CGI. Can only offer them video games. Can only offer them altars. Trying to make them grow weary to where they want to cast lots for other people's clothes for vengeance. That's not the way of Christ. That's not the way we learn Jesus. What's that? Ephesians 4:20, right? That's not the way we learned him, right? So consider that when we're going through these things. Your family does not turn against you. Our family is fighting for their own lives, fighting for their own preservation of their soul and mind and sanctity, right? No matter how far or distant or whatever they feel, they're going through their own things, right? So again, that's why it's so crucial for us to humble ourselves and pray so that God can heal us and heal our land, right? But what I was saying was, we're omens. The closer we go to God, Jesus already went to God. He already conquered the grave. So we draw things to us naturally, whether we want to or not. The more we're seeking God and the more we're called to God, we become like magnets. To others, we become like black holes. Not in the sexual sense, in the spiritual space sense. It's like they all want to go in and try to take over. They all want to try to do some Minecraft on you, right? But when they go in, they get stuck in that. It's like God catches them in their own craft, right? And if we turn against God, we get caught in our own craft too. It's like a spider getting caught in its own web, getting choked by a snake being choked by its own tail, right? Or its own tongue or whatever. And they got some nasty looking tongues. But anyway, right? I'm sorry, but I'm gonna try to get through this, but it's gonna be long. So anyway, right? I'm gonna read from John 19, verse 1 to 16. Right? I found this quite interesting because in particular schemes and stuff I was going through, a type of celebrity images, a type of co-worker images, the type of family images. And when I say images, I'm talking about avatars, because I don't believe these people were actually sent my way. Their images were, though. Right? But I found this quite interesting when I stumbled upon this when I was reading the word the other day. And this word is called Gabbatha. Right? Gabbatha. And if you have followed any of my videos, you know, I have a thing for analyzing words, particularly words of God, words in the Bible, right? Because I have a problem understanding certain things. So I got to look at them multiple ways. Right? But remember, my key point, do not give to Satan what belongs to God. The title of this video is called The Good Soil. Right? So going into John 19. So then Pilate took Jesus and had him scourged, flogged, whipped, and the soldiers twisted together a crown of thorns and put it on his head and put a purple robe around him. And they kept coming up to him saying mockingly, "Hail, King of the Jews! Good health, peace, long life to you, King of the Jews! Good health, peace, long life to you, King of the Jews!" And they slapped him in the face. Then Pilate came out again and said to them, "Look, I am bringing him out to you so that you may know that I find no guilt in him. No crime, no cause for accusation." So Jesus came out wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe, and Pilate said to them, "Look, the man." When the chief priests, officers saw him, they shouted, "Crucify him, crucify him." Pilate said to them, "Take him yourselves, crucify him, for I find no guilt in him, no crime, no cause for an accusation." Now I want to stop right there for a minute. Right? This is Jesus in this passage. Right? They were looking for a reason to kill him, to accuse him, to stone him. They called him a blasphemer. Now consider where we are today, how we're starkly different from Jesus, right? As so-called persecuted Christians and targeted individuals. Blasphemy in all forms, abominations of all forms, is projected in our brain. Right? All day, every day, 24/7. There's a buffeting or buffering. Right? These thorns in our temples, in our flesh. These thorns poking our hearts. These demons and angels warring over our mind. Right? There's a buffering going on. We got all types of blasphemy. Now, if we're used as an amphitheater, a radioactive walking mime, right? Some big boombox, like Radio Raheem, right? Just walking down the street, right? They have all. They may feel like they have all. Like who would have to wonder? What would have to come up to try to kill us, get us crucified, get us killed, get us stoned? People kill people over just a look or impression. And again, I'm saying they don't like what clothes you wear, what impression you have on your face, how you style your hair, what street you decide to walk on, right? They don't need much if they decide that they want to go in and mob on you, right? Bullies don't need much reason to try to bully somebody, right? These bullies these days, in this sense, they want to be intimate with you. They want to go in on all levels, right? But in this passage, we're talking about they were looking for reasons to crucify Jesus. They're accusing him of all type of stuff that he wasn't doing, right? Were they in tune with him? Were they in line with him? Were they intimate with him? Did they share a heart with him? Like, they were connected. Would you be able to say that? Were these people connected with him? They were in his head. They knew his every move, right? That we may feel like that or imagine that or perceive that. But we would deserve it compared to him. Right? Pilate said to them, "Take him yourselves and crucify him, for I find no guilt in him, no crime, no cause for an accusation." The Jews answered him, "We have a law regarding blasphemy. And according to that law, he should die, because he made himself out to be the Son of God." So when Pilate heard this, he was even more alarmed and afraid. He went into the praetorium again and said to Jesus, "Where are you from?" But Jesus did not answer him. So Pilate said to him, "You do not speak to me. Do you not know that I have authority to release you? And I have authority to crucify you." Jesus answered, "You will have no authority over me at all, if it had not been given to you from above." No, he's talking about himself, and he's talking about his Father, right? But he didn't put himself there, allow himself to go there, be brought there, right? And follow the Father's mission given to him and command to him. He won't have no power. He's there because Jesus allowed himself to be there, right? And he was on a mission, on a hidden mission, on a impossible mission sent by the Heavenly Father, right? That no one else could do or be willing to do. No one else will be able to fulfill, right? No one else will be able to surpass, right? He doesn't have a record you can break. Do you not know that I have authority to release you and I have authority to crucify you? Jesus answered, "You would have no authority over me at all if it had not been given to you from above. For this reason, the sin and guilt of the one who handed me over to you is greater than your own." Again, how deep is that? How loaded is that? Because what was he about to do? What was he about to partake in, give himself over to? Give himself over to. As a result of this, Pilate kept making efforts to release him, but the Jews kept screaming, "If you release this man, you are no friend of Caesar." Remember who Caesar was and what Caesar represented. Anyone who makes himself out to be a king opposes Caesar. These are what the Jews were saying, not what the Romans were saying. These were what the Jews, the Hebrews, the high priests, the Pharisees were saying. Anyone who makes himself out to be a king opposes Caesar and rebels against the emperor. This is what they were saying to edge him on, right? When Pilate heard this, he brought Jesus out and sat down on the judgment seat. Now, this is the part where it stood out to me, right? When Pilate heard this, he brought Jesus out and sat down on the judgment seat at a place called the Pavement. But in Hebrew, it's called Gabbatha. Now, it was the day of the preparation. For the Passover week, and it was about the 6th hour. He said to the Jews, "Look, your king." But they shouted, "Away with him! Away with him! Crucify him!" Pilate said to him, "Shall I crucify your king?" The chief priest answered, "We have no king but Caesar." How many times you want to do that? Do we want to do that with our own blood? Do we want to do that with our children, our sons and daughters? We want to do that with our husbands and wives, our cousins, our nephews, our nieces, our grandmas and grandmothers? our grandmas and grandfathers? Do we want to do that with our own blood? Do we want to squirm? Right? We can't do that to Jesus again, but we can do that to each other. Right? We have no way, no path to do that to Jesus again. Right? But we do something like that to him when we do that to each other. If we do that to each other willingly, intentionally, or wrongly, right? Because he's in each and every one of us, right? Do we want to play Caesar? Then he handed him over to them to be crucified, right? Gabbatha is a stone pavement, judgment seat, ridge, hill. Pilate sat down on the seat, calling out the high priest of Jerusalem on the sentencing they wanted for Jesus. Gibeah, Gibeah. Never accuse me of being the best speller. I speak a lot of broken English. Ebonics or whatever. Anyway, Gibeah, hill, means hill, right? And the Bible is a place of a vicious gang rape and death of a runaway virgin concubine, female slaves. Concubines were slaves, sexual slaves. Some of them were, or try to treat it as they were like mistresses or second wives, but they were most commonly considered slaves, sexual slaves. They were just used to make extra babies or be servants or just be used for sex. And they would be they could be both male and female. In the Roman context, they were more often males than they were female. And again, like I was saying earlier, they were often young males. In Asian cultures, they were more often, in Middle Eastern cultures, they were more often females, right? But in these ones, in the like in the Greek and Romans, and the ones that had all these different gods, for some reason, their concubines were more often males, young males or children, right? Both male and female. But the men, again, the powerful men had a preference for little boys, right? Anyway, Gibeah, right? Was a place of vicious gang rape and a death of a runaway virgin concubine female slave, a wife belonging to a rogue Levite priest. This is spoken about in Judges 19 and 20, right? She was raped by Benjamite rebels that led to a massive civil war with all the tribes of Israel against the Benjamites that nearly ended them. They were nearly annihilated, except for what they say, I think about 600. Had it not been for the mercy, intercession, and guidance of the other tribes. So after they nearly annihilated them, then they felt bad because they were still their brothers. They didn't actually want to kill off their tribe, their people, right? So they went to God and sought, advice on what to do next, because they didn't just want their people, their brothers, their cousins to just die, right? But they didn't feel bad that they had to go to war with them. The war was necessary, right? It was an outrage. It was an outcry, right? That was validated by the Lord, right? The outcry was justified, right? But they didn't want to annihilate the Benjamites. They didn't want to annihilate their people, right? Gabriel, what's the name mean? God is my strength, hero of God. Gift of gab, gift of speech and articulation. I'm weird, I know. Bagpipes, the original significance of royal heavenly decrees, right? They were used in instruments used in royal heavenly decrees, like, announcements, like with flutes and stuff like that. You know what I'm saying? You'd see them in particular cultures like, Ireland or Scotland or Britain, or with the police academy or the military, right? Sabbath, the seventh day of the week, holy day of rest after 6 days of work. Christ, holy rest and cease, ultimately jubilee, sanctification, remembrance, and atonement. Jesus is the Lord of the Sabbath. Matthew 12:6-8, Mark 2:27-28. Bathsheba, daughter of Oath, seventh daughter, daughter of seven. Bethlehem, house of bread, birthplace of Jesus. You'd be like, where are you going with this? Pay attention. Bethany house, house of figs, house of afflictions, house of dates. They're all the same character. I don't mean all the same thing, right? These are just different names for the same place. House of figs, house of afflictions, house of dates, house of misery, house of poverty, home of Martha, Mary, and Lazarus, who were close friends to Jesus. Elizabeth, wife of the priest Zechariah. She was also considered to be an elderly aunt or cousin. She was old. She was an old lady, just elderly. She was, up in her 60s, 70s, or something like that, right? But she was old. She was way older than Mary, right? But she was either an aunt or a cousin of the Virgin Mary. But she was family, right? What's her name mean? God is my oath, pledged to God, consecrated to God. God is abundance. What's consecrated God? Set apart for God. For God. Not for the world, for God. Right? Right? Random movies. Different political, spiritual agendas. Now, I don't want to quickly try to tie it into what I got from that word. What was the word? Gabbatha, right? Because I get hit with a lot of homosexual stuff. I get hit with a lot of pedophilia stuff, pedophile stuff, right? I get hit with a lot of harlotry, a lot of idolatry, a lot of things trying to put thoughts of stealing, lying, killing, right? That are not my thoughts. Yeah? I've lied, I've stealed before. But homosexual, no. Pedophile, no. Right? Want to rape somebody, no. Right? Wanting to hurt somebody's baby, no. Right? Wanting to hurt somebody that didn't do nothing to me, no. Right? So, where I tie that into with this word Gabbatha, because that particularly stuck to me, that particularly had an effect on me, because it says this word in the Bible was, do not give the devil a foothold, right? Do not let the sun go down on your anger, right? Don't go to sleep angry. Don't go to sleep and don't pray. Pray before you go to sleep. Don't let the sun go down on your anger, right? Now, when Jesus was in the Garden of Gethsemane, however you say that, right? Which actually also happened to be a cemetery or a burial ground, and it was also at the foot of the Mount of Olives, right? He was praying he kept trying to get his disciples to stay awake to pray. He kept asking them and petitioning them to pray that they do not fall into sin, right? And fall into temptation, right? Do they not fall into sleep into temptation, and to wake up and pray with him, right? He was praying so hard that he was bleeding. He was sweating, and his sweat was turning into blood, right? Droplets of blood, right? That's how hard he was praying. That's how much anxiety, how much trepidation he had in that garden that was also a cemetery, that was also a burial ground, right? That was also at the foot of the Mount of Olives, right? Now, it says that the Sabbath is not made for man, right? The man is not made for the Sabbath. Sabbath is made for man, right? Right. It's our resting place. Now think about that. When these convoluted agendas, what ultimately are they after? Right? They're after our rest. They're after our nursery, our breeding ground. They're after our epicenter. They're after heaven. They're after the central court, right? They want our people, right? They want, what's that? Hebrews 12:23. All the angels and all the redeemed men and women and Jesus and God are sitting on that Mount Zion, right? Gathered together in joy, rejoicing, right? They want that. But they can't get into that. They can't tear that down, right? Again, they have to give us to give it up, right? So when we look at these things that they try to present to us, again, what I was telling you about, by trying to attack God's officers, God's NCOs, God's managers, God's mayors, God's presidents, God's leaders, God's families, God's churches, right? These people in positions. And then think again, what is those positions supposed to represent? What are they supposed to be doing? What is their name? What are their titles supposed to tie into? Right? So again, when you you may start to see these patterns in your own experience in the journey on like seeing how it ties into God and what they're really trying to do. And again, it's all about the Lord. It's all about trying to tear down, dismantle, right? It's all about trying to cause a big turnover in heaven. There's already going to be turnover, but it's never going to be as great as the turnover in this world, right? Remember, how many people did he get? How many angels did he get in the first place? He didn't even get half of them. So, you know what I mean? He didn't even get half. You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, I just think about that. It says, wherever sin abounds, grace abounds all the more. Think about that. How we have these killer assassins, right? Out to steal your soul, out to do nothing but steal, kill, and destroy. But the guardians of heaven will always be more potent. They will always be the mustard seed. They will always be greater. There will always be that thing, that mountain, that force, that even if you tear it down, right, it's still going to be a major upset, right? Because it's going to come down anyway, because it won't come down unless God cuts it down, right? Unless it's according to his will, right? And his will is not for any to be destroyed, but to turn away from their sins in repentance and turn back to him and reconcile. Right? It's not his will for any of us to die faithless. Right? And even if they tear into someone's tomb, they can't tear into Jesus again. Right? Right? They can't get a foothold on Jesus. So even with all the people, right? Even although, what does it say in Ezekiel 13:20 when they start hunting people like they're birds, right? Well, he's talking about hunting their souls, their spirits. Even whatever people they try to get or try to sabotage, they still won't have a lock on them, because they have no ultimate claim, because Jesus is in there. Jesus is shrewd. Jesus will break them out. Jesus will burst every chain and yoke with himself, right? Because he's the ultimate one that holds them together, right? And he's the ultimate one that can separate them, right? I was like, man, since when did Gabriel become Jesus? He's important, or she's important, of great value to the kingdom. But, right, that's not the coup de grace. They already had the coup de grace. Right? No other sacrifice remains. Right? So whenever these things all try to get you to think that you're on the very end, that's messing with your perception of faith. Where is your faith at? I forgot what verse that was, but it says, Jesus says, where is your faith? When they was crying out to him, when the storm was turning over the boat and whatever, and Jesus was sleeping on it, they were completely afraid, completely broken down in fear, in trepidation, trembling, because they felt like they was about to die, and they were enraged that he was sleeping, and they wanted to know, how could he sleep, and what was he going to do about it, right? And he came up, got up, rebuked the wind and the storm and the water, and was like, where's your faith, right? But anyway, so there's a few movies that was with political agendas. Like, there's some movies called Prophecy. There's a movie called Precious, with this black girl who gets raped by her father, right? And she's abused, physically and emotionally abused, by her mother, Mary. Her name is interesting. Her name is Precious in the movie, right? But I really didn't like that movie for multiple reasons. All the more so when I start seeing deeper messages or political messages in it. I didn't like it all, right? Prophecy, right? In the movie Prophecy, supposedly in this movie, Gabriel leads the angel Gabriel leads a rebellion against God, right? Because he's angry about the humans, the favoritism given to humans. So, he starts his own rebellion, but he gets took out by Satan. So, because Satan doesn't want a rival. Some weird crap in the movie, but again, it's an attack on God's ones that are supposed to be devout. We already know the ones who's supposed to already fell out and were defective, right? And supposed to be on the bad ones, right? But it's a whole nother thing when they try to condition our mind to see the so-called good ones that the Bible continually expresses to us. These are the ones that are devout. These are the ones that are loyal, and tries to subliminally or directly attack their character, like Gabriel, or like Michael, right? Or like Peter. So we already know how Peter was, but to try to make Peter worse than what he was is a whole nother thing, right? How much more did they do that with Jesus? We already know what they do with Jesus, right? They try to compare him to Zeus, right? The I Am Legend and I Am Robot. And these particular movies, I Am Legend, well, it was like, it got some disease, right? And took out nearly almost all the people. But his blood, the character in the movie, the lead character in the movie, he was only like one left, or like 3 left in this city. But his blood was the cure. Think about that, how that ties with Jesus. And I am robot, right? He's this dude is angry with the robots, right? Because the robot saved his life instead of saving a child's life, because the robot figured that he had a greater chance of living because he was adult and bigger, so he decided to save his life instead of the child, right? So he was mad that the robot saved him and not the child, right? He figured that to human beings that would be common sense to save the child over the adult, right? If he couldn't save both of them, right? I'm not gonna go on to that because it's it's long already, right? But I'm gonna try to get into the rest of the meat of this video within the next 10 minutes, hopefully. A key point again is, do not give to Satan what belongs to God. Death has no roots. Death has no roots. Therefore, do not give roots to death. Satanic spirits never had nor ever will have a legal right to oppress and possess your souls, minds, hearts, nor bodies. Satan was never a slave master. Let's be clear on that. But an antagonist, an adversary, an ungodly jester, an accuser, and a type of Pharisee of Pharisees, but not. Moreover, his character initiated ongoing anarchy and rebellion without just cause. Notice I said Satan was not a slave master. Whoever sins, right, is a slave to sin, right? But that's in the Bible as well. But when I'm saying that Satan was not a slave master, I'm talking about in the sense that humans at a time given by God had a right to enslave people that went against God, right? They were able to take them prisoners when they were conquering lands, when God was giving them, allowing them to take over lands like the Canaanite, take over Canaan and other places. They were able to take, they had right to take people as slaves, right? Who refused to conform to God. They refused to conform to religion. And, you know what I'm saying? In those particular times, right? So they had a legal right to an extent, to a point, right? For those who went against God. The same thing when, I'm not going to go on to that, when you're talking about warring against people taking over their territory, right? There was some, like, you know, abusive things here and there, but I'm not going to go into that right now. But we're just talking about in the basic sense of slavery to a point was legal because of sin against God, right? Sin against God and people, right? Sin against God and creation, right? So therefore, you know, that was the penalty for that, right? And then it just became compounded, right? But it was never intended for it to be forever. That's why God allowed intercessors to intercede. That's why God introduced new kings. That's why God gave his only begotten son, right? Slavery was never intended to be for his people or any people forever, right? He wants to heal his people. Healing is not slavery. That's oppression. That's not healing, right? Healing is not a caste system, right? Limiting certain people to this or this or that instead of wanting them to reach their full potential in righteousness. No, you can only stay here or here, right? Because I want you to stay here or here. God will only wants that for those who reject him, reject righteousness, reject what is good and true and holy, right? As we already know, right? But that place is beyond this world, right? Anyway, right? Key point, Satan does not have a foothold on Jesus. I said that already. Jesus already overcame the world. John 16:33, 1 John 5:5, Acts 12:2, Romans 12:2, Acts 1 verse 11, 1 Corinthians 3:23, Jeremiah 13:23, Jude 1:23, and Micah 4:9, Job 29:12-14. To debunk and crush demonic intrusive media, seek to daily practice meditation and mindfulness. Philippians 4, speaking life over absolutely everything that spiritual wickedness seeks to poison and metastasize through projectile missiles within your mind, soul, heart, and body. Matthew 5:43-48. So what's Matthew 5:43-48? It's talking about praying for your enemies so we can be perfect like our Father in heaven. Right? The pure heart, only pure heart will see God. You can't be pure of heart if you're harboring bitterness and you're so bitter you can't pray for nobody. Right? Then they're poison. Right? Even if you began angry, even if you had righteous anger in the beginning, then it's like corrosion. You corrode yourself. Right? Because it begins to eat at you. It doesn't destroy your enemy. It destroys you. And you become an enemy to yourself. And again, that's the ultimate power play of these things. If they can't have us, to bombard us and stress us out on how they can get us to take ourselves out. Corrode ourselves. Break our own spirit. Be used as conduits to break the spirits of those we love. Right? Think about that, right? In other words, put in daily overtime, taking up your cross, practicing, actualizing your faith, even if it seems that it mostly just seems small leaps, and simply resisting and defying the overload of guises of this world and the heartache of your lifeblood and breath at high tide. Key point, faith is sovereign over imagination and pride. The just shall live by faith and not by sight. As I live, says the Lord, I do not take no pleasure in the death of anyone, but that they would turn from their wicked ways and live. Ezekiel 33:11. Therefore, if I, his people who are called by his name, will humble ourselves and pray and ask anything according to his will, according to his only begotten Son, Jesus, this is the reason I speak to the crowds in parables. Because while having the power of seeing, they do not see. And while having the power of hearing, they do not hear, nor do they understand and grasp the spiritual things. In them, the prophecy of Isaiah is being fulfilled, which says you will hear and keep on hearing, but never understand. And you will look and keep on looking, but never comprehend. For this nation's heart has grown hard, and with their ears they hardly hear, and they have tightly closed their eyes. Otherwise they will see with their eyes and hear with their ears and understand with their heart and turn to me, and I will heal them. And I would heal them. Spiritually, Christ, he would turn and heal our land. Ask yourself, right? You prefer a healing or a drug? You want something to pacify you so you don't even recognize that you're hurting? Or something to actually heal you and cure you? This false treaty, this false peace plan, it's a pacifier, right? But it doesn't, it grieves. It's a wool over your eyes, right? There's true grief. There's true souls crying out. There's true souls enraged, disheartened, confused, bewildered, right? Who need the Lord, who want the Lord, who are seeking the Lord, who are confused, who are perplexed. Children, innocent children. Men and women perplexed and confused and bewildered. Mind boggled by each other, right? They don't know what to believe. Deceiving and being deceived. Imposters, right? These convoluted schemes and skits, right, are superficial. Are meant to put the wool over your eyes, so you don't really know what's going on. You don't really understand what's going on. It's false peace. So it's like what is this? Right? Or people don't even mourn. People don't even grieve. People aren't even angry. Only their pride. Their everything. It's like there's this movie. I don't remember what it's called right now. Well, it's this movie about these people who are playing this board game, right? Or whatever type of game. It seemed fake at the moment, right? Where these crimes were happening and they weren't taking it seriously. People were getting killed or people were getting threatened, and they all thought it was part of the game till they realized it was real. How badly does the enemy want to psych us out to where we question everything in our reality, right? Or everything in the cerebral. We don't have no discernment whatsoever, right? We're just dull. We see and we hear, but yet we don't see and we don't hear, right? We're just blasted by radio waves, right? We're incinerated from the inside. Our hearts just melting within us, like it says in Psalm 22, right? And like no discernment whatsoever. The wolf that loses or wins is the wolf that you feed or starve. It's such a fallacy. The wolf that loses or wins is the wolf that you feed or starve. Is such a fallacy. Where is your womb? To what do you desire to give life, love, mercy, justice, grace, deliverance to? There is no intimacy. There is no intimacy between true enemies. No bond, no love, no affection, no reverence, no sanctity, no communion. Only a guise, stage, battlefield, training room, and ledge held in place by Christ our Lord and Savior. Christ gave us his all. What did we give back? What did we exchange? Perhaps God the Father will grant repentance for those he knew would turn up. For this reason, Christ came into the world and entered the holiest of holies on our behalf to destroy the works of the devil. As Christ and born-again Christians continue to lift up his cross within the crucible of their fiery trials, we draw all men to us. John 12:31-50. As we draw to God the Father, the world draws to us in persecution. We are like omens. Revelations 12:1, Luke 2:34-35. In the resurrection, the righteous shall neither hunger nor thirst anymore, nor experience death, pain, or tears of sorrow. Revelation 7:16-21:4. Spirits do not eat, drink, nor battle, nor have relations as humans do. Spirits engulf. The spirits that are greater than others will ultimately ensnare, consume, and eliminate the unrighteous in an event horizon. Exodus 7:12, Revelations 12:7-11, Revelations 19. God is able to both remove, heal, or restrain the beast. However, he deems necessary to fulfill his ultimate will. Exodus 4, Exodus 19, Daniel 4, Daniel 8, Jeremiah 13, Isaiah 8, Revelation 13, Ezekiel 3, Ezekiel 13 and 14. Demonic spirits have an insatiable hunger for physical and psychological hosts. Because living organisms, such as humans, animals, plants, and water, are the pinnacle of life and vastly uncharted and unpredictable. Due to the God-given right and privilege of human will, choice, preference, and authority as sons and daughters of the Most High. Burial grounds and so-called purgatory spiritual realms are already demonic playgrounds in effort to hinder, harbor, and deceive fallen human spirits from hearing the compassion and commands of the Heavenly Father. Consider John 11, when it's talking about when Jesus called Lazarus out the grave. When Jesus told the daughter to get up, told the little girl to get up out of her bed. She wasn't asleep. That she was asleep, but she wasn't dead. And he just grabbed her by the hand and lifted her up. Consider 1 Peter 4, 6. When it's talking about he speaks to both the dead and the living. Where are you at if you're dead and you don't hear God and you only hear Satan? Since when does the devil have a monopoly over the spiritual realm and over the physical realm? What monopoly does the devil have? Where's your faith at? Occultists seek scapegoats in order to continue to cycle their sinful caste systems and pact with death. Every carnal attack of temptation, affliction, or condemnation are from satanic entities seeking to deceive you out of your hedge of faith. Their objective seems to be one of subjective transhumanism through imagination, perception, manipulation, and ever-advancing technology, or AI. In other words, a Christian heaven would seem tyrannical, unnecessary, and obsolete within the minds of supposed virtual monopolists. Yet the righteousness of God is not dependent on the character of humanity, nor angels. Righteousness is not a choice for God. It is who He is. What? Yet the righteousness of God is not dependent on the character of humanity, nor angels. Righteousness is not a choice for God. It is who He is. And along with that, mercy as life is a privilege, again, given ultimately by God. Not a right, but a gift He never intended to forsake. James 1:17, Deuteronomy 1:17. This is what the Lord says. The people who survived the sword found favor in the wilderness. When Israel went to find rest, the Lord appeared to us in the past, saying, I have loved you with an everlasting love. Therefore, I have drawn you with loving devotion. Again, I will build you, and you will be rebuilt. O Virgin Israel, again, you will take up your tambourines and go out in joyful dancing. Jeremiah 2:3. I'm sorry that was a bit long, but I hope you get the gist of it. God bless.